Right now, you think you are in control. You think you are choosing to read this. You think every decision you make, what to eat, where to look, what to say next, starts with you. It doesn't. In 2008, a neuroscientist named John-Dylan Haynes at the Bernstein Center for Computational Neuroscience in Berlin ran an experiment that quietly dismantled one of the most fundamental beliefs humans have about themselves. He placed volunteers inside an fMRI scanner. Their task was simple. Whenever they felt like it, they would press a button with either their left hand or their right hand. That was it. No instructions on when, no instructions on which hand. Just whenever the urge arose, they pressed. At the same time, they watched a stream of letters flashing on a screen inside the scanner. When they pressed the button, they noted which letter was showing. That letter marked the moment they felt the conscious urge to move. Haynes then compared that moment to the brain activity his scanner had been recording the whole time. What he found should not have been possible. His equipment could predict which hand the subject was going to use up to 7 seconds before the subject felt any conscious intention to move at all. 7 seconds. Not a fraction of a second. Not a processing delay you could explain away. 7 full seconds before the thought entered conscious awareness, the brain had already decided. The decision was made. The conscious mind just hadn't been told yet. Haynes published his findings in the journal Nature Neuroscience. The paper did not stay quiet for long, because what it implied was not just surprising, it was destabilizing. If your brain makes decisions before you consciously decide anything, then what exactly are you doing when you think you are choosing? Are you making the choice, or are you watching it happen? But before we get to that question, there is something even stranger buried inside this experiment, because Haynes didn't just find that the brain decided early, he found where. The activity that predicted the decision showed up first in a region called the pre-supplementary motor area, a part of the brain involved in preparing movements before they happen. But it also showed up in the frontopolar cortex. This is significant. The frontopolar cortex is not a motor region. It is not involved in moving your hand. It is one of the most advanced regions of the human brain. The region associated with complex planning, abstract thinking, and holding multiple possible futures in mind at once. In other words, the part of your brain that was making the decision 7 seconds early was not the automatic part. It was the thinking part. The most sophisticated part of the human brain was running the decision before consciousness arrived at the table. Now here is where scientists began to split into two camps. The first camp said, this proves free will is an illusion. The decision is made before you know about it. Consciousness is not the driver. It is a passenger being shown a highlight reel of choices the brain already made. The second camp pushed back hard. Neuroscientist Aaron Schurger at Princeton reanalyzed the data in 2012 and found something that complicated the picture significantly. The early brain activity Haynes detected was not a clean decision signal. It was noise, random fluctuations in neural activity that gradually crossed a threshold. And the moment they crossed that threshold, the brain committed to the movement. Schurger argued that what Haynes had recorded was not a decision being made 7 seconds early. It was a decision process, a slow build of random neural activity that tipped over a line and became a choice. And here is the critical part. Schurger's model predicted that if you interrupted subjects with a signal just before the threshold was crossed, they could still stop themselves. He tested it. He was right. Subjects could abort the movement even after the early brain signal appeared, even after the fMRI showed a decision forming, which means the conscious mind is not completely locked out. It may not be the one pulling the trigger, but it might be the one that can veto the shot. This is what neuroscientist Benjamin Libet had suggested decades earlier in his own landmark experiments on voluntary movement. Libet called it the veto power of consciousness. The conscious mind may arrive late to the decision, but it retains the ability to cancel it. You are not the author of every impulse, but you may be the editor. Think about what that means for the way you live. Every craving that arises before you notice it. Every flash of anger that appears before you have processed what happened. Every pull toward something you later regret. None of those began with a conscious choice. They began somewhere else. in circuits you cannot see, running processes you cannot access, making preparations you were never consulted about. What consciousness gives you is not the power to originate. It gives you the power to pause. The 7 seconds are not a prison. They are a window. And most people spend their entire lives never knowing the window exists. Haynes has continued this research for nearly 2 decades. His more recent work has pushed the predictive window even further. Using more advanced scanning techniques, his team has found traces of decision-related activity up to 10 seconds before conscious awareness in some tasks. 10 seconds. The gap between what your brain is doing and what you think you are doing is wider than anyone expected. And it raises a question that neuroscience has not yet answered cleanly. If the conscious you arrives late to every decision, who is making them in the meantime? Nobody knows. But here is what the research does tell us. The version of yourself that acts on every impulse without pause is not exercising free will. It is just executing the brain's first draft. The version of yourself that stops, even for a moment, and asks whether this is actually what you want. That version is the closest thing to free will that science has ever found. Not the choosing, the pausing, that is where you actually live.